Hey guys, tonight we're going to step out into a world where the air is so cold your breath turns to mist the second it leaves your mouth, and the sky feels low enough to brush with your fingertips. The ground beneath your boots is hard, a little crunchy with frost, and somewhere out beyond that pale horizon, something is moving. You can feel it before you can see it, the faint, rhythmic thump that vibrates through the soles of your feet, as if the earth itself has a heartbeat. It's not just one creature. It's a whole procession of them, moving with a strange, regal slowness across the grasslands. Their silhouettes grow taller, broader, stranger. And then you catch the outline, wide, towering racks of antlers that look like someone stuck half a tree on top of their heads. The Irish elk has arrived, and suddenly you're very aware that you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes out here without a good plan, a warm fire, and the ability to run faster than whatever decides you look like lunch. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the middle of a late Pleistocene morning, the sky somewhere between silver and pale blue, the light not so much shining as leaking into the world. The air smells faintly of damp earth and dry grass, as if rain might be coming, though you suspect it never really comes here. It just hovers in the distance, teasing. Every breath you take feels sharp, almost metallic, the way cold can make you aware of your own lungs. The grassland spreads out flat for miles, dotted with small clusters of birch and pine that huddle together like gossiping neighbors, their branches creaking softly in the wind. This is not Ireland as you'd recognize it from postcards. No rolling green hills, no tidy stone walls. Right now, this land is more raw, more open, a stage for survival instead of leisure. And standing on it, you realize that the title, Irish elk, is already misleading. For one thing, it's not actually an elk. It's a giant deer, technically Megaloceros giganteus, the kind of name that sounds like it should be painted in red on the side of a circus tent. From a distance, they don't move like anything you've seen before. There's a peculiar weight to them, not clumsy, not exactly graceful, but a kind of rolling power in every step, as though the earth were bending slightly to make way. The antlers catch the pale light, and you can see they're not just big, they're absurd. 12 feet across on some of the larger males, a crown so wide you wonder how they even walk through a forest without snagging on every branch. Historians still argue whether those antlers were mostly for show, for fighting, or a disastrous case of evolutionary overcommitment. You take a few steps forward, crunching the frost underfoot. There's a strange quiet to the place. The wind brushes past your ears, carrying the faint sound of hooves, hundreds of them, paired with the occasional deep grunt that's less a call and more a statement of presence. It's the kind of sound that makes you want to keep your head down and avoid eye contact. The lead bull turns his head, and for a second, you swear he's looking right at you. His eyes are dark, unreadable, but there's a flicker in them that says he's fully aware of his size advantage. His breath streams from his nostrils in quick, warm clouds, disappearing into the cold. His muscles shift under a thick, coarse coat the color of late autumn leaves. You notice the scars, not many, but enough to tell you that even something this massive isn't invincible. And here's the thing, this landscape isn't some prehistoric paradise. It's a tightrope. Every living thing here is balancing between enough food and too little, enough warmth and too much cold, enough luck and one unlucky moment. You remember reading somewhere that during the last glacial maximum, this part of Europe wasn't entirely locked in ice but was still close enough to the edge that winter lasted longer than it should, and summer barely got started before the cold came back. The grass grows tough and short here, good for grazers, but not the soft, lush kind that lets you lie down for an afternoon nap. Somewhere to your right, you catch movement, a shadow slipping between the trees. You half expect a wolf, but what steps out is leaner, quieter. Blinks. It stares at the elk from a distance it knows is safe, tail flicking in that lazy, unimpressed way cats have perfected for millions of years. You try to imagine what it would feel like to walk alongside one of these elk. Up close, you'd probably have to tilt your head back just to see the tips of the antlers. You could fit a whole child between the spread of them. Though, for the record, that's not an experiment you should ever try. Each tine looks sharp enough to open you up like an overripe melon. The herd moves past you, the air shifting as they go, carrying a faint musky smell that's not unpleasant but earthy and heavy. You follow them, because what else are you going to do? The sound of their movement becomes hypnotic, hooves sinking slightly into damp soil, the occasional clatter of antler against antler when two males drift too close. There's an odd comfort in their rhythm, as if for a moment you're part of something that's been going on for tens of thousands of years. And in a way you are. These creatures have been here long before any written history, before borders and flags, before the word Ireland even meant anything. They've survived ice ages, predators, and the kind of winters that make modern humans cry over a 2-day snowstorm. But survival is always a temporary victory out here. As the day edges forward, the frost starts to soften, and small clouds of insects rise from the grass, only to vanish again when a breeze sweeps through. You hear a bird, something sharp and quick, cut the air with its call. The elk barely react. They've learned what matters and what doesn't. The lead bull lowers his head, tearing at the grass with his teeth. His antlers dip low enough to make you wonder if the weight ever strains his neck. Scientists have found fossilized skulls so massive that the bone at the base of the skull is thickened, possibly to help support that load. Whether that's adaptation or just biology finding a way to cope with its own excess, no one's completely sure. And yet, despite their sheer presence, there's something fragile about the scene. You can't help but think how a shift in the weather, a change in the plants, or the arrival of a clever predator could tip the balance. Maybe it's just human instinct to look for the cracks, but you find yourself wondering, not if they'll survive, but how long they have left. You keep following the herd, and the closer you get, the more those antlers feel like some sort of cosmic joke. From the front, they fan out in perfect symmetry, each branch tapering to a point so clean it could draw blood with the slightest graze. They rise above the bull's head like a massive, jagged halo, except this isn't the kind of halo that says, blessing. It's the kind that says, I can take you apart without trying. You remember hearing once that these antlers could span up to 12 feet from tip to tip. That's wider than most cars, and heavier than you'd like to think about resting on your own skull. Mainstream paleontologists will tell you they probably weighed around 80 pounds, but even that's a conservative estimate. It's hard to picture 80 pounds unless you imagine carrying a small child on your head all day, every day, for months. Historians still argue whether these antlers were truly practical for survival or whether the species just got trapped in the evolutionary arms race of who can grow the flashiest crown. You watch two males square up in the distance. They're not fighting yet, more like sizing each other up, moving in slow circles, heads tilted just enough to catch the light on their antlers. From here, the tines almost glow against the pale morning sun, like bronze blades. You can feel the tension in the air, the low growl of challenge vibrating through the herd. And here's the strange part. Most of these standoffs don't end in an actual clash. Sometimes, just seeing the sheer size of your rival's headgear is enough to make you back down. But when they do fight, it's violent in that blunt, bone-on-bone way. You imagine the sound, like two trees slamming together in a storm, except faster, sharper. There's no grace in it. They push and shove, muscles straining, hooves digging deep into the earth until one finally gives. The loser stumbles back, antlers tilting, breath coming in sharp, fast clouds. And just like that, it's over. No dramatic chase, no kill. Just a simple, brutal negotiation over who gets the next shot at passing on their genes. A quirky fact slips into your mind. Those antlers weren't just dangerous in combat, they were also a bit of a liability. Try fitting through a dense forest with a 12-foot rack. It's like walking around your house carrying a ladder sideways. You're going to hit something. Some researchers think that's why these elk preferred open grasslands and sparse woodlands. Others think they just didn't care and forced their way through, snapping branches like toothpicks. The bull nearest you shakes his head, and the antlers move with a kind of weighty sway. You can almost hear the strain in his neck muscles. Imagine wearing a heavy motorcycle helmet 24 hours a day, except instead of protecting your head, it's mostly there to impress or intimidate other people. Nature has a sense of humor like that. The herd keeps moving, the bulls at the edges, females and younger ones in the middle. Their coats catch the light in different shades, deep brown, rusty gold, even a hint of gray. You notice the calves, spindly-legged and slightly awkward, their smaller frames free from the burden of antlers for now. They stick close to their mothers, ears twitching at every sound. Every so often, one of the bulls raises his head sharply, nostrils flaring. You follow his gaze but see nothing, at least nothing your human eyes can spot. Maybe it's the faint scent of a predator, or maybe just another bull miles away sending a challenge through the wind. It's worth remembering that these antlers weren't grown overnight. Each year, the bulls shed them, leaving behind heavy, curved bones scattered across the land like some strange, natural sculpture garden. And then, almost immediately, they start growing again, faster than any bone in your own body could dream of. In a few months, they reach full size, covered at first in a soft, velvety skin rich with blood vessels. That velvet feeds the growth, and when the antlers are ready, the bulls rub it off against trees and rocks until only the hard bone remains. You spot one of those shed antlers half buried in the grass. Up close, it's absurd, each tine smooth and cold under your fingertips, with the faintest ridges spiraling along the surface. It feels like something that belongs in a museum, not lying here like an abandoned tool. You can see why ancient humans picked them up. Some used them for practical purposes, digging tools, levers, but others, you suspect, just wanted the bragging rights. Imagine hauling one back to camp and plunking it down in front of the fire. Conversation starter, guaranteed. Historians still debate the role these antlers played in mate selection. Were they truly a sign of strength and genetic health, or just an evolutionary fashion trend that got out of hand? Some point to fossil evidence showing that, in certain cases, the antlers may have been so large they made the bulls slower, easier targets for predators. Others argue that if the antlers were truly a disadvantage, natural selection would have scaled them back. The truth probably lies somewhere between deadly crown and mating display gone rogue. You watch as one bull turns toward the low sun, and for a moment his antlers blaze in the light like a burst of fire. It's beautiful in that raw, impractical way nature sometimes allows. You can almost imagine early humans seeing this sight from a distance and turning it into myth, a sun-crowned beast that ruled the grasslands. And maybe they weren't entirely wrong. The herd slows near a shallow stream, their breath steaming as they lower their heads to drink. The water is cold enough to sting your fingers, but they gulp it down without pause. The bulls lift their heads now and then, scanning the horizon, antlers dripping, sunlight catching on the rivulets. Somewhere behind you, the wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of pine and something faintly smoky, maybe a distant fire, maybe just your imagination. You realize that here, in this frozen edge-of-the-world place, those antlers aren't just decoration. They're part of the landscape, as much a feature of it as the frost and the open sky. And whether they're a gift, a burden, or both, they define the creature wearing them as surely as the earth defines the horizon. The land begins to change under your feet. The open grassland you've been crossing tilts and folds into long, shallow valleys, where the wind doesn't bite quite as hard and the frost lingers in the shadows. Ahead, the horizon is not a straight line anymore. It's broken by ridges of pale rock, their surfaces scoured smooth by something far older and heavier than rain. You've reached the edge where ice and green meet, a place that doesn't quite belong to either world. You stop and take it in. To the north, you can see the wall of the ice sheet, massive, pale, and distant, like a frozen ocean frozen mid-wave. It doesn't move quickly, but it doesn't need to. Over centuries, it's been pushing and grinding, swallowing everything in its slow path. Even from here, you can hear it faintly, a kind of low groaning, like the earth straining under its own weight. Closer to you, the ground is alive. Thin streams of meltwater snake through the valleys, feeding patches of green that look almost too bright against the muted colors of the surrounding land. The air here is sharper, cleaner, but it carries with it a dampness that clings to your clothes. You can feel it in your bones. This is a place that changes mood by the hour. A sunny patch can vanish under a sudden curtain of fog. A warm breeze can turn icy with the turn of the wind. The Irish elk navigate this boundary zone with practiced ease. You watch them move between the open meadows and the edges of the forest, their hooves leaving dark impressions in the thawing ground. This isn't just random wandering, they're following routes their kind have known for generations. The grass near the meltwater is rich, softer than the brittle stalks out in the open plains. It's food worth the risk of coming closer to the treeline, where predators might be waiting. Historians still argue whether these seasonal movements were strictly about food or also tied to mating and calving cycles. Some think the herds shifted between high summer pastures and sheltered winter grounds in a careful rhythm. Others argue they followed the green like a slow tide, never truly settling. Whatever the truth, you can tell this isn't aimless grazing. There's a quiet precision to it, as if the land itself has taught them a map you'll never quite read. Here's the quirky part. These green valleys weren't always as inviting as they look. The melting ice carried with it more than just water. It scraped minerals and fine rock powder from the mountains and dropped them here, turning streams milky and coating the soil with a strange, dusty layer called glacial flour. Some plants thrived on it, others didn't stand a chance. You crouch down and rub some of the silt between your fingers. It's fine as talcum powder, and it leaves a faint gray trace on your skin. You can see why early humans sometimes used it as a kind of primitive pigment. The forest edges here are tricky. Thin pines and birches grow in clusters, their roots tangled in shallow soil. From a distance, the trees seem harmless, open enough to see through, but step inside, and the shadows start playing tricks. The wind makes the branches knock together like loose bones. Every so often, you catch the flick of movement that turns out to be just a startled bird. Still, the elk don't linger in here long. They slip in, feed on the young shoots, and slip out again before the light fades. You walk along the line where grass gives way to snow patches, and you notice how the elk seem to sense the changes before you do. A sudden gust, a shift in scent, a faint vibration in the ground, you barely register it before the herd adjusts course. It's a reminder that in this landscape, instinct is as vital as muscle. Somewhere beyond the next ridge, you hear the rush of a larger river. The sound is constant but uneven, as if chunks of ice are breaking loose and tumbling downstream. You picture the elk wading across, water swirling around their legs, the bulls lifting their heads high so the antlers clear the overhanging branches. It's not an easy crossing, but it's worth it to reach the grasslands on the other side. The light here is fickle. A moment ago, the sun was pouring gold into the valley, and now it's dulled by a thin mist rolling off the ice sheet. The air temperature drops instantly. You pull your coat tighter, though the elk don't seem to notice. Their winter coats are thick and layered, designed for exactly this kind of sudden shift. One bull pauses on a rise, his silhouette framed by the ice wall behind him. From here, the contrast is almost theatrical, massive, branching antlers outlined against a frozen expanse that's been here since long before his species walked the earth. You wonder if the herd senses the scale of the ice, or if it's simply background to them, part of a world they take for granted. You step onto a patch of ground where the frost is still locked tight. It crunches under your boots like breaking sugar glass. The air here tastes faintly metallic, like the inside of a coin purse. Maybe it's the minerals in the meltwater, or maybe it's just what cold air does to your senses. There's a moment where you realize how much of this journey is defined by the meeting of extremes. Hard ice against soft grass, still forests against open sky, survival against slow starvation. The elk don't think about it in those terms. They just move, graze, survive, and move again. But you can't help framing it like a balance sheet in your head. Gain here, risk there. As the day slips toward evening, the shadows grow long across the valley floor. The elk drift into the lower ground, where the grass stays warmer under the lingering meltwater. You stay on the ridge a little longer, watching them settle. From here, they're just dark shapes against the mottled green and white. The ice wall catches the last light, glowing faintly like a frozen lantern. And somewhere in that vast quiet, you can almost hear the rhythm of the seasons turning. A slow, patient heartbeat that's kept time for thousands of years. You come across the first real sign that something here existed long before you set foot in it. A scatter of pale shapes half buried in the dirt, just where the wind has cleared the grass away. At first glance, you think they're just rocks, worn smooth by the weather. But the closer you get, the more they resolve into something unmistakable: bone. Not the bleached white you might imagine from a desert, but a soft, honeyed beige, with edges rounded by time. The surface is mottled, marked with tiny pits where soil and water have worked their way in over centuries. You crouch down and brush away a thin layer of grit. The piece you uncover curves slightly, thicker than your forearm, and feels cool in your hands despite the sunlight. This is no random scrap. This is part of a skull. And not just any skull. Judging by the size, it could only belong to one thing out here. Megaloceros giganteus. An Irish elk who stood, grazed, fought, and died in this same stretch of land long before you ever came along. The rest of the skeleton lies scattered nearby, ribs half sunken in the earth, one massive leg bone jutting out like a lever left behind by some careless giant. You can see where predators or scavengers might have dragged pieces away, the ends gnawed down to splintered points. And yet, somehow, enough remains to tell you the rough shape of the animal. You run your hand over the surface of the skull, feeling the subtle ridges where muscle once anchored. It's strange to think that this smooth, silent bone once housed eyes that scanned the horizon, ears that twitched toward the faintest sound, a mouth that tore through the same coarse grass you've walked over for days. Historians still argue whether finding remains like this tells us more about the animals themselves or about the land that buried and preserved them. The quirky thing is, a lot of what we know about the Irish elk comes from accidents, bones found when farmers drained bogs, when road crews cut through soil, or when curious kids poked around a stream bank. The famous Dublin skull was pulled from a bog in the 17th century, so perfectly preserved it sparked centuries of fascination and scientific debate. Back then, some even thought these were the bones of mythical beasts, too grand to have been anything ordinary. You walk a slow circle around the skeleton, piecing together the story. The leg bones are still aligned enough to suggest the animal died here, not far from where it spent its days. Maybe it slipped on ice, or maybe a harsh winter left it too weak to fend off wolves. Or maybe, as the researchers like to hedge, cause of death cannot be determined with certainty. Nature's crime scenes rarely come with neat explanations. You notice one antler lying a short distance from the skull. It's not connected anymore, and the burr, the base where it once joined the skull, is rough and weathered. You lift it with both hands and immediately feel the weight. Even after centuries in the earth, it's heavy enough to make you respect the animal that carried it. There's a faint smell to it, something between mineral and moss, like a stone that's been sitting underwater for a long time. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you recall reading that early humans didn't just stumble across these bones, they used them. Antler tines were cut down into tools, the long beams shaped into handles or levers. Some pieces were carved, decorated with geometric lines or stylized animals. You can picture someone squatting by a fire, working a fresh antler into something useful while telling a story about the great beast it came from. The wind shifts, rattling the grass, and you're reminded that this skeleton is only here because the land allowed it. Bones are fragile things in the grand time scale. Most vanish into dust within decades. For one to survive hundreds or even thousands of years, it needs just the right balance of burial, moisture, and luck. Too dry, and it crumbles. Too wet, and it rots. In a bog, though, where oxygen is scarce, time seems to hesitate. You find yourself wondering how many more skeletons lie just under the surface here, unseen. For every one uncovered, dozens more may still be sleeping in the soil, waiting for an ice melt, a plow, or an idle wanderer like you to bring them back to the light. You sit back on your heels, looking over the scene. There's no drama to it, no roaring predators or heroic last stands. Just the quiet certainty that this creature lived, and now it doesn't. And in the middle, there's an entire lifetime you'll never see. A lifetime written only in the shapes and textures left behind. Somewhere nearby, you hear the distant call of another animal. It's not the sharp bark of a fox or the howl of a wolf, more of a low, resonant note you can't quite place. Maybe another elk, alive and moving, tracing the same paths its ancestor once walked. You imagine it passing by this very spot, unaware of the bones beneath its hooves. The light is starting to shift again, sliding toward that late afternoon gold. You leave the skeleton where it lies, brushing your hands on your coat, and stand. The wind carries a hint of cold from the ice sheet, but also the earthy smell of grass warming in the sun. It's as if the land itself is reminding you that in this place, life and death are just two ends of the same path, and the trail keeps going long after the walker is gone. You don't walk far before you realize the Irish elk were never alone out here. This land is busy in its own way, quiet, sure, but not empty. Every patch of grass, every shadow in the trees, seems to hide something with its own business to attend to. And as you follow the faint tracks of the herd, you start catching glimpses of their neighbors. The first you notice is a shadow slipping low along the slope to your left. It moves like water over rock, smooth and silent. When it pauses, you see it clearly, a wolf. Not the lean, hesitant thing you might picture from modern Europe, but a big, thick-coated animal built for long-distance travel over snow. Its fur is a pale mix of gray and cream, streaked darker along the back. You can tell just by the way it moves that it's been here far longer than you have, and it knows every rise and hollow in this terrain. It stops and looks toward the trail of the elk, head low, ears pricked forward. You half expect it to dart toward them, but it doesn't. Not yet. Wolves here hunt in packs, and one alone wouldn't dare take down something the size of a full-grown bull. This one is just keeping watch, marking the direction, waiting for the others. You keep moving, and the forest opens briefly onto a stretch of frost-speckled grass where the wind has flattened everything into soft waves. From the far side, something steps out, tall, brown, and vaguely familiar until your brain finally places it. A steppe bison. Broad head, horns that curve up and out like sharpened crescents, shoulders humped with muscle. It chews methodically, ignoring you completely. You realize the elk and the bison probably cross paths often, each giving the other the wide, polite distance of big animals that don't want trouble. Historians still argue whether these species competed for the same food or simply coexisted by grazing in slightly different patterns. Some think the bison preferred shorter grass and tougher stalks, leaving the taller, softer growth to the elk. Others believe they often clashed when resources got scarce. Either way, standing between them now feels like you're wedged between two living pieces of prehistoric armor. A flicker of movement in the tree-line catches your eye. At first, you think it's just the wind, but then you see the mottled golden-brown coat of a lynx slipping through the shadows. Smaller than the wolf, sure, but built with the kind of focus that doesn't waste energy on anything it can't catch. It pauses to watch you, tufted ears twitching, before vanishing as quickly as it appeared. You can't help but think about what it would be like to live here without the human comforts you take for granted. Out here, there's no locked door between you and the food chain. Every step is a negotiation. Are you prey, predator, or just an inconvenience? And the Irish elk, as massive as they are, sit somewhere awkward in that hierarchy, too big for most predators to risk, but too tempting for the truly desperate. A quirky detail comes to mind. Cave paintings from France and Spain sometimes show Irish elk alongside mammoths, lions, and rhinos, as if they were just another part of the background cast in the Ice Age drama. Some of those depictions even exaggerate the antlers, making them so huge they look like they could block out the sun. Whether that was artistic flair or just accurate observation is still debated, but it tells you something. People remembered these creatures not just for their size, but for the company they kept. The light filters differently here. In the open, it's pale and cold, but under the trees it softens into greens and golds, even in the depths of winter. You notice how the elk move through it without hesitation, their eyes scanning more than their noses guide them. Sight is a valuable thing in this kind of country. One wrong shadow and you're lunch. Somewhere behind you, the wolf reappears, this time with another in tow. They keep their distance, parallel to your path. They don't look hungry yet, more curious, maybe even patient. You imagine them trailing the herd for hours, waiting for a calf to stray too far or for an old bull to lag behind. Out here, patience can be sharper than teeth. The forest begins to thin again, and you step into a clearing where the ground dips toward a marshy hollow. The air is warmer here, smelling faintly of wet soil and old leaves. You see fresh tracks in the mud, some elk, some bison, and a few smaller, sharper prints you can't quite place. You kneel and touch one. The edges are crisp, the soil still damp. Whoever made it pass through recently. There's a moment of stillness, just the faint creak of trees in the wind. Then, from far off, you hear the trumpeting call of something much larger. It echoes across the valley, low and resonant enough to make the hairs on your arms rise. A mammoth, maybe, moving through some distant grove. You don't see it, but the sound alone reminds you that this isn't just elk country. It's a whole continent of giants and opportunists, each with their own claim to survival. As the elk herd moves on, you notice how they thread their way between all this life. They don't avoid the other species entirely, but they don't linger near them either. They've learned the same lesson everything out here knows. Keep moving, stay aware, don't invite trouble. You follow their lead, stepping carefully as the shadows lengthen, knowing every eye in this place is watching something, even if it's not you. Here's the thing about following Irish elk: you never really catch them standing still for long. They move like they have a schedule, even if the schedule is just don't get eaten, find food, repeat. But late in the day, when the cold sinks a little deeper into your jacket and your breath comes in slow clouds, you stumble on something rare, a resting place. It's not dramatic. No glowing shafts of sunlight or Disney-style clearing. Just a patch of ground where the snow is pressed flat in wide, shallow ovals, beds. The elk themselves are still here, scattered in a loose circle, some lying down, some standing but relaxed. Their heads move slowly, scanning the tree line without much urgency. If you watch long enough, you start seeing patterns. The older bulls don't bed down in the middle. They take the outer ring. It's not chivalry, it's strategy. If something comes out of the trees, the predator has to get through half a ton of muscle and bone before it reaches the more vulnerable cows and calves. That buys the herd time. One young bull shifts his weight, and you see just how much antlers matter even when they're not in use. They make him look bigger, more of a problem for anything thinking about testing him. Out here, looking like trouble is almost as useful as actually being trouble. There's a sound nearby, a faint crunch of snow that isn't wind. Heads snap toward it, ears flicking forward. You freeze, half expecting a wolf, but instead it's a red fox, trotting with that half bounce, half glide they do when they're not in a rush. The elk watch it pass without alarm. Wrong size, wrong shape, wrong problem. You start thinking about how prehistoric people would have read this exact scene. A quiet herd like this would have been an opportunity, if you had the numbers, the weapons, and the nerve. But even then, one bad step and you're dealing with an animal that can knock you flat and crush your ribs before you even draw a second breath. For a minute, you just listen. The place has its own soundtrack. The slow grind of teeth on dry grass, the huff of breath from massive lungs, the occasional soft clack of antler tips as bulls shift position. It's not silence, it's a kind of low, steady living noise, like the background hum of the Ice Age. When they rise again, it's almost in unison. One stands, the others follow, snow shaking off their coats. No one gives a signal you can see, but clearly something has told them. Time to move. They angle downhill, heading for the darker smear of forest below, and once again you're just a shadow trailing shadows. Evening in the Ice Age isn't like modern dusk. There's no streetlight glow, no distant highway hum, no porch lamp flicking on to remind you you're almost home. The light just goes. One moment you're walking in the long, cold shadow of a ridge, and the next, the whole world is swallowing itself in blue-gray. The elk don't hesitate. They know exactly where they're going, even if you can't see the path. Their hooves make a muffled crunch in the crust of snow, and you notice they keep a pace that feels steady but not lazy. It's a rhythm that says, we'll get there when we get there, and we'll get there together. Down in the trees, the air changes, still cold, but thicker, quieter. Snow catches on the evergreen boughs overhead, and every so often, a branch dumps its load with a soft whump. You catch the faint scent of pine resin, and under it, something muskier, the herd itself. Big animals always carry a smell, not unpleasant but heavy, earthy, a reminder of their size and presence. They pick their way into a stand of spruce, the kind of place where the snow is shallow because the branches have been catching it all winter. This is where they'll feed tonight. You spot pale shoots poking through, tough grasses, little frozen ferns, a bit of bark scraped bare. Not much by human standards, but for an elk's stomach, it's calories. Every so often, one of the cows stops chewing and raises her head, ears twitching. The others do the same, as if listening to something you can't hear. Maybe it's the wind shifting. Maybe it's wolves. Out here, you never really know which. Historians still argue whether Irish elk were more vulnerable at night or whether their size alone made predators think twice. Either way, they're not reckless. There's a moment where the forest goes too quiet, like it's holding its breath. You scan the dark undergrowth and catch the faintest glimmer, eyes reflecting just a sliver of starlight. Too far to tell what, but close enough that the elk notice. The nearest bull steps forward, not charging, just making himself visible. His antlers look absurd in the dim light, like some prehistoric chandelier you'd never dare dust. Whatever's out there decides it's not worth it. The eyes vanish. The elk relax, but not completely. Night has its rules, and one of them is that nothing is safe forever. You keep moving with them until the sky is fully dark, the only light a scatter of stars so sharp you feel you could cut your fingers on them. The herd beds down again, this time closer together, their breaths rising in small clouds that merge and drift. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf does call, long and low. No one moves. By now your own steps are slowing, not from cold, but because the darkness feels heavy, pressing in on your eyelids. The elk's breathing becomes your metronome, and the forest becomes a deep, quiet room. Morning arrives not with fanfare, but with a slow, creeping chill that seeps into your bones before the sun even dares to peek over the horizon. The world is muffled under a thick blanket of frost, and every breath you take hangs in the air like a whispered secret. You pull your coat tighter, the fabric stiff and cold against your skin, and glance over at the elk herd still nestled in the hollow. They stir reluctantly, heads lifting, nostrils flaring as they taste the frigid air. You notice the subtle shifts in their fur, frost crystals catching the dim light, clinging like tiny stars before melting away. The bulls stand first, their massive antlers scraping softly against the low branches overhead, sending a faint cascade of snowflakes down like a cold confetti shower. It's an oddly festive start to a day that will demand everything from them. You watch as the herd rises and begins its slow pilgrimage out of the sheltering forest and back toward the open plains. The ground crunches beneath their hooves, the sound sharp and rhythmic, cutting through the quiet like a slow drumbeat. Every step feels deliberate, measured. There's no rush here, only survival. Historians still debate how much these early mornings define the daily rhythm of the Irish elk. Were they driven by hunger and instinct, or did they follow some deeper, perhaps even spiritual cycle dictated by the shifting seasons? Maybe the truth is a little of both. Hunger sharpens the senses, but rhythm keeps the herd together. The air is crisp enough to carry distant sounds. You catch the faint caw of ravens wheeling overhead, their black silhouettes cutting across the pale sky. Their presence feels like a subtle warning, a reminder that death and life have always danced side by side on these frozen fields. As the elk spread out to graze, you notice how the bulls keep close watch on the perimeters, their antlers raised slightly as if to say, "Not today." The younger males poke at the snow-covered grass with tentative nibbles, learning the balance between risk and reward. There's a strange beauty in watching the herd adapt to the morning cold, the way they turn their heads to catch the weak sun, the way their breath clouds mingle and rise like smoke. It's a scene both fragile and unyielding. You find yourself wondering about the delicate balance the elk had to maintain, between energy spent warming their bodies and the calories gained from the sparse winter grass. It's not just about eating, it's about knowing when to rest, when to move, and when to fight the relentless pull of the cold. A sudden movement catches your eye. A young calf, awkward on its legs, tries to follow its mother but slips on the frozen ground. The mother nudges it gently, patient but firm, teaching it the rules of this harsh world. You breathe in the cold air again, feeling the weight of history pressing down around you. This is not a world for the faint-hearted. But it's theirs, the Irish elk, kings of the Ice Age plains, struggling every day to stay alive against the slow creep of ice and time. The sun climbs higher, but the cold never quite lets go. You watch the elk move across the frozen plain, their breath steaming in the still air like ghostly trails. The world here feels suspended, frozen moments stretching into hours. Each animal moves with a purpose, eyes sharp, muscles taut beneath their thick coats. You notice the bulls again, their antlers catching the weak sunlight, casting long, crooked shadows across the snow. Those antlers, they're as much a weapon as a statement, a way to say, I'm here, and I'm not messing around. It's an age-old game. Grow big, fight hard, survive longer. Historians still argue about how much these antlers actually help the elk in day-to-day survival versus just being a flashy showpiece for mates. The debate goes back and forth, but either way, they define the creature's silhouette against the horizon. Off to the side, you spot something unexpected, a patch of frozen mud cracked and crisscrossed with tracks. Among them, smaller, more delicate prints weave between the hoof marks. You crouch to study them. Hairs, you decide, maybe a fox's paw here and there. The smaller creatures leave the faintest signature of life, often overlooked but crucial in the bigger picture. The elk seem aware of these neighbors, but they don't slow down or speed up. It's a delicate balance. Every creature here plays a role, pushing and pulling against each other in a slow, steady dance of survival. A quirky bit to chew on. Some paleontologists suggest that the Irish elk's massive size might have made them less agile than smaller herbivores, leaving them vulnerable in certain situations. Yet, their sheer bulk could have been a deterrent against predators. So, were they slow-moving giants or majestic, almost untouchable monarchs of the steppe? The answer remains cloudy. You see the herd begin to pause at a cluster of dwarf birch bushes, their branches bare and brittle. The elk nudge and nibble, stripping the bark carefully. Bark might not sound like a feast, but in winter, it's a lifeline. You can almost taste its dryness and bitterness in your mouth as you watch them. Suddenly, the air shifts, a distant howl slices through the silence. Heads snap up. The bulls raise their antlers, muscles coiling like springs ready to snap. You feel a tightening in your chest, that primal tension that's been part of this landscape for thousands of years. It's a reminder that danger never fully sleeps here. Still, the elk carry on, choosing survival over confrontation most days. You think about how these ancient rhythms, feeding, watching, waiting, mirror so much of life itself, ancient or modern. As the afternoon drifts toward evening, the herd moves again, tracing the edges of the frozen riverbed. You follow quietly, senses alert, the cold now settling deeper into your bones, matching the slow pulse of this endless ice age world. The late afternoon sun slants low, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the frozen ground. The elk herd slows, moving toward a rocky ridge where the wind seems less biting, sheltered by the jagged contours of the landscape. Here, the earth rises, cracked and scarred by time, and the sparse vegetation clings stubbornly between stones. You notice the bulls pause at the ridge's base, sniffing the air, their breath pluming in the cooling light. Antlers glint, catching what little sun there is left, and you can almost see them weighing their options. The spot isn't just shelter, it's a vantage point, a way to spot danger long before it gets too close. There's a practicality to this move you hadn't noticed before. The elk aren't just wandering aimlessly, they're choosing terrain that offers a mix of food and safety. This ridge holds patches of lichen and moss, tough but nutritious enough to keep them going when the grasses have been stripped bare. You touch the rough stone beneath your fingers and imagine the elk scraping away snow to reach the frozen plants below. Historians still argue whether these late-season strategies were instinctive or learned behaviors passed down through generations. Some suggest the herds followed ancient migratory routes, returning year after year to the same refuges. Others think the elk adjusted their habits based on immediate conditions, making each year a new survival challenge. You suspect the truth is a bit of both. As you watch, a bull shakes his massive head, sending a shower of snow from his antlers. You almost laugh, picturing the frustration. It's like trying to wear a giant crown that doubles as a snow trap. Yet he stands firm, the king of this rugged little kingdom. Suddenly, a noise breaks the calm. From a rocky outcrop nearby, a shadow detaches itself, a lone human figure, wrapped in furs, clutching a spear. The sight feels oddly familiar, a living echo from thousands of years ago. You imagine this hunter's eyes locking on the elk, heart pounding with the thrill and danger of the chase. The hunter moves slowly, deliberately, careful not to startle the herd. You feel the tension spike, the fragile line between life and death pulled taut. And then, just as suddenly, the elk pick up on the presence and shift away, antlers brushing branches, hooves crunching dry twigs. No chase this time. For now, survival means avoiding unnecessary risks. It's strange to think that these animals and people shared this land for so long, their lives entwined in ways we can only guess at. Some evidence suggests early humans scavenged from elk kills or even used their shed antlers for tools and art. It's a quiet partnership, shaped by necessity rather than friendship. You watch the hunter disappear behind a boulder, the wind catching at his cloak. The elk continue onward, moving toward the twilight and whatever challenges it will bring. You feel the day winding down, the cold deepening, and your own footsteps growing heavier. This place is vast, ancient, and indifferent, but you're still here, tracing the steps of giants and those who followed them. Night falls like a curtain, thick and heavy, swallowing the ridge and the elk within it. The cold sharpens, cutting through every layer you've wrapped around yourself, and the stars overhead glimmer with an icy clarity that feels almost too bright. There's no artificial light here, no campfires or torches, just the natural glow of the cosmos stretched out like a frozen quilt. You watch the herd settle again, the bulls finding spots to rest with antlers sprawling like ancient tree branches. The younger elk cluster close to the cows, calves nestled between legs like shadows tucked in for safety. Breaths rise in soft puffs, merging with the night air, and the whole scene feels both fragile and fierce. From somewhere beyond the tree line, a low howl rises. It's a wolf, calling across the silent valleys. The elk don't panic, they've heard this song 1,000 times. Instead, you notice the bulls stiffen, muscles coiling just beneath the fur, antlers raised in quiet warning. Predators respect size and show of strength. Sometimes that's enough. Historians still debate whether wolves hunted Irish elk solo or relied mostly on pack tactics to bring down such enormous prey. Some evidence points to wolves scavenging more often than hunting, but the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Nature rarely gives clear answers. Your thoughts drift to the strange duality of this place, a peaceful slumber shadowed by the ever-present threat of violence. It's a delicate balance, and one misstep could change everything. But the elk rest, embodying a calm that comes from knowing the rules, even if the dangers never truly vanish. You imagine the sounds of the night, the crack of a twig, the rustle of fur against frost, the distant echo of calls between wolves. It's a natural lullaby, raw and unpredictable, but somehow soothing in its constancy. As you settle in alongside the herd, without disturbing a single creature, you feel the world slow to the steady pulse of survival and rest. In this frozen wilderness, night is neither safe nor cruel. It simply is. Dawn creeps in with a pale blush, softening the harsh edges of the night. The air is still cold, but there's a hint of promise, like the world's taking a slow, deliberate breath before waking fully. You watch as the elk stir, their bodies loosening from the stiffness of sleep, muscles flexing beneath frosted fur. The bulls are the first to rise, antlers silhouetted against the lightening sky, casting shadows that stretch long and lean. You notice something. Their antlers, which seemed almost ornamental in the dark, now look functional, tools shaped by evolution for more than just show. You see them brushing aside brush, testing the weight of snow on branches, even sparring softly to keep skills sharp. Historians still debate the exact purpose of those enormous antlers. Some argue they were primarily for mating displays and dominance fights. Others suggest they could have played roles in defense or even thermoregulation. The truth might be tangled somewhere in those theories, or in all of them at once. Nearby, the calves awkwardly try to mimic the adults, their legs stiff and uncertain on the uneven ground. One stumbles, nearly slipping on a patch of ice, but quickly regains balance. Learning fast is a matter of survival here. You catch a fleeting glimpse of a scavenger, a raven, sleek and watchful, hopping between rocks. Its sharp eyes are always alert for leftovers or weak prey. A quirky detail you recall. Some ancient cultures believed ravens were messengers between worlds, possibly because they so often show up around death and decay. The herd begins moving, lowing softly to one another as they navigate the frost-bitten terrain. You follow, feeling the cold seep deeper but the rhythm of the elk's movement warming something inside you. Out here, every day is a lesson in endurance. Every step is a decision. And though the land is harsh and indifferent, life continues, stubborn and fierce. You feel the chill deepen as the herd moves into a vast stretch of open steppe, the landscape flattening into endless waves of frost-kissed grass. The horizon feels distant here, a faint blur where earth and sky trade places. The wind carries a sharper bite, tugging at your clothes and whispering secrets older than the hills. The elk move with deliberate care, hooves crunching against frozen earth. You notice how the bulls keep a tight formation around the younger ones, a living shield against the invisible dangers lurking just beyond sight. Predators may be silent, but these giants have learned to read the language of the land, the snap of a twig, the soft shift of snow. Here's a quirky note. Recent studies suggest Irish elk antlers grew so large and heavy that the bulls might have had to carry their heads in a sort of nodding dance to keep balance. Some researchers think this made quick escapes or sharp turns nearly impossible, forcing the elk to rely more on strength and intimidation than speed. Imagine that, nature's own slow-motion gladiators. Historians still argue about how these size extremes affected the elk's survival. Did the antlers become a burden too heavy to bear, contributing to their extinction? Or were they a key to their dominance in their prime? The debate rages on. You watch the herd approach a shallow pond, its surface cracked and frosted but still holding water beneath. The elk lower their heads cautiously to drink, eyes flicking toward the surrounding trees. Even this simple act carries tension. Water sources are precious, and predators often lurk nearby. As you stand quietly, the wind shifts again, carrying a scent that sets your nerves on edge. Something else is out here. Another presence moving just beyond the tree line. You squint into the shadows, heart picking up pace, but all you catch is the faint rustle of leaves and the distant cry of a bird disturbed. Life out here isn't just survival, it's a constant negotiation, a game where every move matters and the stakes are high. The elk know this well, and so do you, trailing behind in silent respect. The day fades faster than you expect, the pale sun dipping behind the jagged silhouettes of distant hills. Shadows stretch longer, swallowing the steppe in a quiet hush. The elk herd slows to a crawl, muscles tired but instincts sharp, moving toward a narrow valley flanked by rocky outcrops and scattered pines. You feel the weight of the cold settle deeper into the earth and your bones alike. The air tastes sharper here, with a faint metallic tang that makes you pull your scarf tighter. The elk seem to sense this shift too, their movements becoming more cautious as they navigate the uneven terrain. You spot fresh tracks in the snow, larger, heavier than the elk's, crisscrossing the valley floor. Wolves, you think? Predators that have been stalking this herd for generations, patient and relentless. The tension between hunter and hunted hangs thick in the air, almost tangible. Historians still argue whether the relentless pressure from predators like wolves contributed directly to the Irish elk's extinction or if climate and habitat changes were the real culprits. The truth is probably a messy combination. No single factor acts alone in nature's grand design. A quirky side note, some fossil sites reveal evidence of ancient humans hunting or scavenging Irish elk, sometimes even using their shed antlers for tools and art. Imagine the quiet reverence these massive bones might have inspired, symbols of power and endurance carved into stone and memory. As dusk deepens, the elk settle among the rocky shadows, antlers interlacing in silent, protective clusters. You watch their breaths rise in misty plumes, their eyes reflecting the fading light like ancient lanterns. The sky darkens to a deep indigo, stars pricking through with cold clarity. Somewhere in the distance, the faint howls of wolves echo, a haunting soundtrack to this ancient landscape. You feel a mix of awe and quiet melancholy, standing on the edge of a world that's slipping slowly away, one frozen breath at a time. The night deepens into a silence so complete it feels like the world itself is holding its breath. The elk rest, massive bodies pressed close together for warmth, their antlers casting intricate shadows that dance softly in the pale moonlight. The cold wraps around everything, a quiet, unyielding presence. But here, in the stillness, it becomes something almost gentle. You watch as the herd breathes in rhythm, soft clouds rising and dissolving into the night air. It's a simple, ancient pattern, life persisting against all odds, caught between the relentless ice and the stubborn warmth of survival. You think about how long this dance has played out, how many times dawn has followed darkness in this unforgiving land. The wind carries faint sounds, distant howls, the rustle of branches, the soft crunch of hooves, and then fades away again. It's a lullaby written in the language of the wild, both comforting and haunting. Historians still debate the exact causes of the Irish elk's extinction. Was it climate change, human hunting, or the burden of those enormous antlers? Probably a mix of all three, wrapped up in the shifting puzzle of an Ice Age world. What this really means is that survival isn't just about strength or size. It's about adaptation, timing, and sometimes a bit of luck. You let your eyes drift closed, imagining the slow turning of seasons, the quiet footsteps of herds moving through frost and snow, the deep patience of a landscape that outlasts us all. As your breathing slows, the edges of your vision soften, and the story gently fades, like a dream slipping into the back of your mind. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.